President Cyril Ramaphosa concluding his two-day testimony at the state capture inquiry yesterday. He was quizzed on his CR17 presidential campaign, inter-party fundraising and delays by the governing party to do something about state capture. He denied that his CR17 campaign raised R1 billion, saying it was more around the 300 million rand mark, all of which was spent on T-shirts, caps and election paraphernalia and not to buy votes. The president also deferring some of his questions to May. That's when he returns to the commission in his capacity as head of state. Let's recap some of his testimony. Our guest this morning is Tasneem Essop. She is a researcher at the Society, Work and Politics Institute. Tasneem, a very good morning to you once again. Thanks so much for your time this morning on the AM Report. And I wonder whether you will agree with me that day two of the president's testimony was a lot harder for him than his first day on the stand, with the evidence leader and the Deputy Chief Justice really drilling down into some of the big issues.
Yeah, morning. Yes, perhaps slightly better, but I still am not, a lot of my questions aren't answered.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of questions that people have aren't answered, and I still have a few issues with the way the evidence was led even on day two. So I think, yes, you can argue that it was better, but
yeah.
I think we still have so many question marks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the issue around the length of time it took the governing party in its own structures and also in Parliament to act on real evidence on state capture as far back as 2012, as far back as the Gupta leaks. 2016, when a member of its own structures, Mcebisi Jonas, came forward and said, I was offered a bribe by the Gupta family and yet nothing was done. I believe the president's response to the Mcebisi Jonas issue was that the party had then decided it was something they would deal with internally.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that there was a lot of hindsight going on yesterday, and a lot of sort of apologetic gestures that were given. But I think for a lot of people, including myself, this is going to be a bit unsatisfactory, right? For one, I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa was there in his capacity as ANC president, and at the time that we're talking about was deputy president of the ANC, so a lot of this would have been happening right under his nose. So I think just on a personal level, but also at the level of the ANC, it's impossible not to have known what was going on. It's impossible to have not seen the kind of crisis that the ANC was heading towards and the country. And I think for me, this thing of hindsight and of being apologetic is a bit problematic to come back to now, right? I mean, many in the country could see what was going on. Most people could kind of get a sense of what was going on, and for the ANC then to have been so slow, and personally to have been so slow to reacting, I think is a problem. Now, where I am sympathetic is that political parties move slowly, and there are factional battles in political parties, and I do get that. But I think then there's a bit of dishonesty there. If the inertia was due to what was the internal politics of the party, and that there were people who wanted to act, then that should have been said, right? That wasn't said in that way. So it does just leave a lot of questions around hindsight, and I think because we heard that word so much yesterday, that for me it really rings a few bells that there's now this apologetic tone about it. But really, you were there. You were second in command of the ANC, really.
And the reason why I started our interview by saying that, in some ways the Commission did go in a bit harder was on that very issue that you just raised, the issue of, hindsight. Yes, we dropped the ball. And Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo saying, it's actually not enough that you just talk about, yes, it is a fact of us dropping the ball. In hindsight, yes, we can see we should have acted much quicker than we did. In fact, Zondo saying you need to explain the exact juncture where the party went wrong so that a repeat can be prevented and your promises of self-correction are actually credible.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good point, right? Where did the party go wrong? But I'm also taken by the argument that it's not there isn't one moment where this happens, right? And that certainly there was a trend that should have been seen and certainly should have been backed. There's also another argument here that could be made, and it's not an argument that I would personally make, but that is that some politicians in the ANC, as they saw what was happening, were playing a long game, a sort of tactical approach to dealing with the issues as they were coming out. And I mean, so that's another approach. I mean, I spoke about a different approach earlier. So there are these different sort of ways of perhaps explaining it. But for me, I didn't really get an answer on that, right? Nor did I get an answer if it was a phase, a gradual decline into what we see as state capture now, or a gradual decline into the levels of corruption that we see. I didn't see that sort of explained either. So I think, I mean, there's still, as I said, a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, and I understand that this is where it was given some leeway to say, go back, do the homework, go and have a look at some of the history of the ANC and of the country during that time, and come back to us in May and give us more detail on what you mean by hindsight, what you think about, this is where we dropped the ball. Tasneem, I want to get your input on what the president had to say when he was asked about the years of media reports around state capture and allegations that government ministers were taking their instructions from Saxonwold, effectively. And what he had to say in response to that was, this is a quote from the Mail and Guardian this morning, which has a great article on just what unfolded yesterday. He says, as politicians, we don't always believe what the media writes because we look at what they write through a particular prism, but in this instance, we have to commend them. They've played a patriotic role.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't read the article yet, but I do, of course, recall this quote from yesterday at the commission. So, I mean, just before I answer that directly, I think the one good thing was how ANC statements were brought out to kind of show the position of the party during those years, and actually really quite embarrassing. To be reminded really of some of the things that the ANC was saying at that time. I mean, on the issue of the media. So, I mean, the relationship between a ruling party and the media will obviously at times be a tense one, right? I mean, I'm not a member of the media, and I don't want to comment too much on the media, but I would think that the relationship shouldn't be so fraught that allegations would be dismissed, or allegations of this nature would be dismissed. And then there was the issue that it wasn't just coming from the media. So, I mean, I personally also, I'm not trying to downplay in any way the role of the media. I think that the media played an absolutely crucial role in uncovering some of what was going on. And without that, I would agree that we probably wouldn't be where we are today. But I do just want to problematize the way it's being pitched now. The way it was dismissed when it came out, and just what the nature of that relationship is then inside the ANC, how the media is viewed, and really how fraught that relationship is. And I mean, I just wondered about that, and whether it was a bit of playing up that relationship that, we kind of dismissed it at first because of the relationship with the media. So while I take the commending of the media very, very seriously, I do think we need to just understand a little bit more that relationship. And of course, this is historic. I mean, the ANC's relationship with the media goes back, and it is a pre-1994 issue in some ways. But of course, we're dealing with a very different thing when it comes to uncovering state capture.
Tasneem, at the start of our interview, you talked about having a lot of questions still that weren't answered during these 2 days of the president on the stand. When he does go back to the inquiry in May, what are some of the big ticket items that you want him to be really, really drilled on?
I mean, the issue is that he will now be going back as president of the Republic in a different capacity. So, I mean, really, what you can say for the ANC, and we heard a lot about policies of the ANC and principles of the ANC, and then the CR17 campaign and so on. And all of those are very important. But I think when the president goes back, it is going to be about the role as deputy president, leader of government business, and really being in government where this corruption and looting was taking place. So I think the questions have to be so much more specific around his personal role in that, his personal knowledge of that, his personal accountability for that. So I think what we didn't get to yet is accountability. So we got apologies, we got hindsight, and we got a lot of politics in the last 2 days. But I think that level of accountability, personally, as number two, I think needs to be really pressed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tasneem Essop, thanks very much for your time this morning on the AIM Report. She's researcher at the Society Work and Politics Institute, joining us there this morning as we continue to unpack the President's 2 days testifying at the state capture inquiry, and he returns for another 2 days of testimony in his capacity as head of government in May, which starts tomorrow, so next month. Still to come.